In this lesson, we're going to see how to check for broken links on an entire website. So what I mean by this is we're going to see how to check for links that are no longer accessible. So maybe that could be a 404 reason, so the site no longer exists. Maybe there's an internal server error. Maybe there's an unauthorized error. We're going to get to the bottom of it. So where you might see the value in this is if you're looking to get the maximum SEO, so search engine optimization, you're going to want to make sure that all of your links are working as they should. You don't want any dead links or broken links. So you could go ahead and do all of that manually, or you could use a tool or plugin for your programming language of choice. So for example, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at Broken Link Checker. So this is an open source project. There is a command line tool that you could use, or what we're going to be using is we're going to be looking at the JavaScript way of doing things. So we're going to take this tool, we're going to build a very simple JavaScript application, and we're going to use it to check for dead links on our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a blank project. So this is Visual Studio Code. There are no files currently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say touch, and I'm going to say main.js. Now, if you don't have the touch command, go ahead and create a main.js file however you feel the most comfortable inside of a directory somewhere on your computer. In my case, it's called link checker. What we're also going to do, because this is a JavaScript project, we're going to need to use node.js, so we're going to be using npm. So what we can do is we can say npm init-y, and what that's going to do is it's going to create a package.json file in our project. So the next thing we want to do is we want to say npm install. We want to say broken link checker, and we're going to save it as a development dependency. So -- save dev. And you'll notice that when it's done, if we look at the package.json file, you'll notice that it has now installed broken link checker. So if we look at the documentation for this tool, like I mentioned, you could use it as a command line utility, or we can make use of it as an actual JavaScript API set. So we're going to be using it to check an entire website. So what that means is not only are we going to check a given page that we provide this particular utility, but it's going to recursively check all links that it finds until it's done. So basically, if you give it a particular site, and that site has maybe 3 links on the page that you provide it, it's going to check each one of those 3 links, and then it's going to check the links on those pages as well, provided that it's still within your particular website. So it's not going to say go from your website to somebody else's website and then check all of the links on their website as well. It's not going to work that way. So let's go ahead and start adding it to our particular main.js file. So the first thing that we want to do is inside of that main.js file, we're going to say constant, and we're going to say site checker equals require, and we're going to say broken link checker. Now that it's included, now we can actually add our JavaScript code to make it possible. So what we can do is we can say constant site checker, and notice that that's a lowercase s, equals new site checker, and we're going to provide it some options. So if we look back at the documentation, the options are actually down below, and there are only a few, but let's go ahead and find it. So we have accepted schemas, cache, we have information about whether or not we should include external links, so on and so forth. I'm going to walk you through some of the settings that I like to use when I use this particular tool. So for the options, the first thing that I'm going to add is exclude internal links equals false. So it's already false by default, but I like to include it anyways, just so that way I know what it's set to. But what we're saying is, let's go ahead and scan the local links on our website. So if our website is called thepolyglotdeveloper.com, any URL that has the kind of base name, thepolyglotdeveloper.com, it will be checked. Whereas if we had set it to true, it means that we're not going to be scanning any links that say thepolyglotdeveloper.com. Next up, let's go ahead and say exclude external links. So this kind of works the opposite. Do we want to scan links that are outside of our domain. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean that we're going to go to somebody else's site and then scan all of their links. It just means that if we're linking to, say, github.com from our website, is it going to scan that github.com link? And for this, what I want to do is I want to say false, because I don't want it to exclude external links. I want to make sure that all links on my site are working the way that they should. Next up, the filter level. So this is kind of negotiable depending on your needs. I like to set it at 0. So 0, what that's saying is it's only going to scan clickable links. Now that means that if you have some kind of meta information with a link or something else, it's just not going to scan it. So some of the options that we can include for the filter level is, well, do we want it to scan images and frames and things like that? Do we want to scan CSS sheets? How far do we want to go? And for me, I just want clickable links. If the user is going to try to click somewhere, I want to make sure that that link is going to go somewhere. So let's go ahead and check it out again. So I'm going to minimize. Let's go to the next step. So let's go ahead and take a look at accepted schemes. So there are obviously a lot of different types of URLs that you can use. You can use mail to, you can use HTTP, HTTPS. There's some Bitcoin URLs. There's all different types of URI structures. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify only the ones that I want to scan. And I want to scan HTTP. Whoops. And I want to scan HTTPS. So if there's a mail to, it's not going to scan it. If there is some kind of other link, maybe it's Bitcoin, maybe it's FTP, whatever the reason, it's not going to look at it. Now let's go ahead and look at some excluded keywords. So the excluded keywords is if this particular keyword shows up in the URL, should it be scanned? And if it's in this list, it's not going to be scanned. And one of the reasons why you might want to have an excluded keyword is some sites actually have a block enabled, so that way when you try to scan it, it's just always going to return some kind of error, even if that link is not dead. So it's really going to waste our time if we try to scan it. So one of the offenders that does this is LinkedIn. Now there are others, of course, and I like to include other links as well. I usually include all of the social media links, but it's totally up to you on which ones you want to add to the exclude list. I'd say add LinkedIn at a minimum, but it's totally up to you. Let's go ahead and say exclude links to same page. So I usually set this to true. Now, you don't technically need to set this to true because by default what it's going to do is it's going to cache the links. So that way, if you try to access that same link more than once, it's going to use whatever was in the cache. So if it returned back a 404 as that first request, well, if you try to hit that same URL again, it's not going to make the request. It's just going to automatically say 404. But if we had set the cache to false and we're not caching, then we would say exclude links to same page. It basically keeps a list of links that it hit already, and it's not going to hit the same link twice. So I'm going to set it to true anyways, even though this one's not entirely useful, but I like to know that it's there just in case. So those are the options, and there are other options that you can set, but these are the ones that I tend to use when I check for dead links on the polyglotdeveloper.com. Now what we want to do is we want to figure out what's going to happen when we start our scan process. So let me just format this a little bit better so that way we don't start ending up with messy code. So this is where we start working with our listeners, so our events. What's going to happen when there's an error? What happens when there's a link? What happens when we're done scanning completely? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with error. So we're going to say error, and if there's an error, let's go ahead and take whatever that error was, and we're just going to say console.error, and then we're going to say error. Very simple. Now let's go ahead and see, well, what happens when we're done. So we're going to say end. So when all of the links on our website have been scanned, so the whole scanning process is complete. In this case, we're not receiving any kind of payload. So what we're just going to say is we're going to say console.log, and we're going to say the scan is done. And this could obviously take a long time depending on how many pages exist on your website. Now let's take a look at another one. So the next one we want to take a look at is link. So every time we scan a link or attempt to scan a link, this particular event will be triggered. So we're going to say result And there is some custom data that you can use, but we're not actually going to be passing custom data around, so we can skip it. But what we're going to say is, we're going to say, for now, let's just say console.log result. So just so that way we can get an idea of what our result is every time a link is scanned. And we're gonna customize that as we progress as well. So I'm going to save it. Now what we want to do is we want to scan a website. So if I go back to my web browser, I could scan the polyglotdeveloper.com. The problem with this is that I actually run this utility on my site. So I like to try to keep my site in good health. And by good health, I mean I try not to have any broken links. So with that in mind, what we're actually going to do is we're going to scan somebody else's site. And this is nothing against their site. It's just I know that this particular site has a lot of pages. Ray Camden, great guy, great developer, produces some very awesome content. But I know he's got more than 6,000 blog posts that he's written. And I have a good feeling that he probably hasn't kept all of them up to date in terms of links. Again, nothing wrong with what he's doing. He does great stuff. But I figured this would be a great example when it comes to actually testing a website. So this is raymondcamden.com. And that's going to be the URL that we use when we try to scan. So let's go ahead and go back into our project here. And we want to use the site checker. So we're going to say site checker.enqueue, and we're going to pass it in that URL. So we're going to say https www.raymondcamden.com, and this is going to be what we scan. So I'm going to start it off. It's going to print out a ton of information. So I'm going to stop it almost immediately after it starts running, and we're going to break it down. So I'm going to say node main.js. So I ran it. It's spitting out a ton of information down in my log here. And we'll just pick out one of these links. So we're looking at one. This particular URL, this is the URL that was used. And as far as results that came back, we're looking at the HTTP. We're looking at the response. We got a response 200. 200 isn't necessarily bad. And in fact, it's not bad, because this particular link event, it's doing everything. It's not telling us what's just broken. It's telling us the status, what happened to every link that was possibly scanned. And it's saying that this status was okay. And if we look at whether or not it was broken, well, it's not broken because it's a 200. And it's also an internal link, so this is true. So we're just looking at some of the information that we can use when it comes to the scanning process. So let's go ahead and modify this event for the link. We're going to change it up so that way we start working with only if something was broken. So I'm going to say if result.broken, and that's right here. So if I look at the output, broken is going to be true or false. If it's true, that means that there was some kind of problem reaching that URL. So I'm going to save it, and it's going to change things for us. So I'm going to clear my terminal, and I'm going to say node main.js. And you'll notice that it's still spitting out stuff. It's going to be less because there's obviously going to be less broken links in theory. But for example, we took a original URL. This is a CodePen URL to CF Jedi Master. We look at the HTTP request, 503. I think it says service temporarily unavailable. I'm not an expert when it comes to status codes, but usually codes in the 400 and 500 are ones that you probably don't want to receive. And it also says that it's broken. So that's a good indicator. We actually found a broken link. So if we went to where this particular link appeared, which is going to be on the base URL, so raymondcamden.com, it tells us where to find it. We can actually go and we can fix it. So let's go to make some more modifications. We want to clean up what our output looks like, so that way maybe it's just a little easier to work with, because if we have a lot of pages, looking at these objects is going to be kind of challenging. So let's go ahead and modify our link event further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if, and I'm going to say result.http.response. So if there is a response from the request, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide it a list of status codes. If the response shows up in one of those status codes, I don't want to show it, basically. So we already know that it's going to be broken. We already know that it has to be one of the broken status codes, otherwise it's not gonna reach this point. But maybe you don't want to do anything for 401 or 403, and I think both of those would be unauthorized. Maybe you're less concerned about whether or not something is authorized and more concerned if something was not found at all. It's totally up to you. So I'm going to say and not equal, and this is going to be an array, so I'm going to say undefined. So if for some reason maybe the response code or the status code is undefined, and it does happen, I can't really explain why it happens. I think it has to do with the URI format. But if it's undefined, and maybe we want to ignore 401 and maybe 403, what we're going to do is we're going to say includes, and that's actually an array function in JavaScript. So we're seeing if this array includes a certain status code, and we're going to say result.http.response. We're going to say status code, because if we look at our response, we do have HTTP response status code in here. So nothing new. Now, in the event that this happens, then what we can do is we can print it out. So now we're narrowing it down. We're basically saying we're not going to worry about undefined 401 and 403, but we're also going to do another step better. So working with an object where we have a ton of information, not particularly great in my opinion. It's not useful to me. But what I'm going to say is I'm going to say result. I'm going to say http.response status code, and I'm going to say in curly brackets again result.url.original. So, and I misspelled it. Original. So what I'm saying is I only want to print out the status code if it was obviously a broken URL, and I want to print out the URL that was broken. So that way I can just go find it. And if I wanted to, I could also include the base URL as well. But you know what? I could easily do a find in my project and be well off as well. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to clear, and I'm going to say node main.js. Now, it might take a minute, but as you can see now, we have 503 for this CodePen project. If I give it a second, it's also going to spit out others, I assume. So you can see that it found a lot of URLs that are 404, they no longer exist. So these, in theory, if you wanted to clean up your website and possibly boost your SEO, you would go in and fix these links. Maybe they redirect somewhere else, maybe they don't exist at all and you want to remove the link altogether. It could drastically improve the quality of your website. So let's just go ahead and recap a little bit what we did. I'm going to close out of the terminal because we don't necessarily need to see it right now. But we downloaded the broken link checker package. So this is an open source project. There are plenty of crawlers that you can do as far as JavaScript. You don't even have to do them in JavaScript. There's probably Go crawlers and things like that as well. We're doing JavaScript for this example. Once we've included the site checker, and this isn't a URL checker, this is a full site checker. There are other options for this package. We're creating a new instance of it. We're defining some settings. So in this case, we are choosing to scan for both internal and external. The filter, we're only scanning for clickable links. We're defining the schemes. We're defining what sites we don't want to include and whether or not we want to exclude links to the same page. After we do that, we can define, well, what kind of events are going to trigger based on the scan. And this is 3 of I don't know, I think there's 6 or 7 different possible events that you can look at. These are the ones that I typically look at. So error, did something happen, and are we done scanning? And this could obviously take a long time depending on the size of your site. But most importantly, the link event. So the link event, basically everything is scanned, all of the results are spit out, but you want to check to see if a link is broken. And then if you're like me, you want to narrow it down and possibly only spit out the information that's relevant to us. And again, we scanned Raymond Camden's website. Nothing against him. I just know that he has a very large website. There's bound to be some broken links, whereas the polyglot developer, I tend to run this particular script and fix my broken links. So we just needed something to play around with. And if you wanted to, you could add this script to, say, a gulp or a grunt task. So that way, if you wanted to, you could include it as part of your continuous deployment pipeline. If you really wanted to, you could check to see if all of your links are good before building, and you may in fact have a better site from it. Now, it could also significantly slow down that deployment process, but that's totally your decision on what comes out of it. So if I go back into my web browser, again, this is the broken link checker package that you can find very easily on GitHub, and it does include a command line utility as well as some kind of programmatic API. Did you enjoy the video that you just watched on YouTube? I wanted to let you know that I also have a courses platform where I create and publish courses that go into a little more depth than the typical tutorials that you find on the YouTube channel. So if you go over to courses.thepolyglotdeveloper.com, you'll see a selection of courses, some of which you may find interesting.